President Donald Trump became the Wolf of Wall Street yesterday as he was invited to the New York Stock Exchange to ring the opening bell, the first president to do so since Ronald Reagan. And he rang it in true Trump fashion. He did. He's like, I've got all the glory. I've got all the eyes on me. I'm going to keep ringing this bell over and over and over again. And it was quite the sight. And people were thrilled to see him there. He spoke to the crowd. He went down on the floor and he met with a lot of the traders and he talked to them about the great things to come and how exciting the future will be. And big things are in store for the United States of America and Wall Street and investors and people like you and me with retirement plans. And this all came right on the minutes after Donald Trump was announced to be Time Magazine's Person of the Year. And they celebrated that at the New York Stock Exchange as well. It was the big story of the day that President Donald Trump, who just over a year ago was having his mugshot taken in Georgia, is now on the cover of Time Magazine as Person of the Year, heading into his second administration after an overwhelming win in both the electoral vote and the popular vote against Kamala Harris just over a month ago. I mean, it's amazing. It seems like the election was just yesterday and also so far away. And it seems like January 20th can't come soon enough. In fact, there were a couple of other people that President Donald Trump spoke with while he was down there. One of them was Jim Cramer. And a lot of folks said he kind of took a dig at Jim Cramer that maybe Jim Cramer didn't realize or just kind of sloughed off.
I know you've got a ton of things to do, but what can you say to the working person who owns stocks? Should they buy more stock?
Well, I don't want to get into a situation where they do and we have a dip or something, because that can always happen. You know that better than anybody in the world, probably. I think you're the leading authority in going up and going down, but you always end up. He always ends up. That's the good news. But we have, like, Doug Burgum standing right over here, who's done a fantastic job. He's been on your show many times, and we have just tremendous people. I would say this, I think long term, this is going to be a country like no other. We had the 3 best years ever until COVID came in, and then we did a good job getting rid of it. The stock market, if you look at the markets, were higher than just previous to COVID coming in when we handed it over. And
Donald Trump telling Jim Cramer, I don't want to say anything because a stock will go up or a stock will go down, and you know that probably better than anyone else. You have quite the track record of saying one thing and the opposite thing happening. But in addition to Doug Burgum, who's the North Dakota governor, soon to be Secretary of the Interior, Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, was also there. And Jim Cramer caught up with him to talk about what the Treasury is going to look like, what investments in the stock market are going to look like, what the economy is going to look like under the second Trump administration. Here's what Scott Bessent said.
What do you want to tell the Americans? What do you want to tell the nation about investing right now?
Well, look, I think what we're going to see from President Trump is Wall Street can win and Main Street can win, just like President Trump 1.0.
All right.
Everybody can do great.
Fair enough. And
all right, Wall Street can win. Main Street can win. There's going to be no more good versus evil. There's going to be no more us against them. There's going to be no more rich versus poor. And in Joe Biden's economy and what we've seen over the last 4 years is that you can't seem to have both sides winning. The rich people just got richer, and the middle class and the small business owners got crushed under the weight of inflation and Joe Biden's horrible economic policies. The cost of everything rising, and gas prices and food and rent. There was a shortage of employment as well. I mean, all of these things that COVID and Joe Biden's mandates and his economic if you really want to call it anything, it's economic malpractice. All of the damage and destruction it caused to our country. And now Scott Bessent, Donald Trump, Doug Burgum, all of them. Howard Lutnick, all of them are going to come back in and working together as Treasury Secretary, Commerce Secretary, Secretary of the Interior, this economic council that President Donald Trump is creating. They are going to make Wall Street and Main Street all great again. Stephen Miller, one of Donald Trump's closest advisors, said something that I think was very poignant. He was on a panel discussion. I think it was for the New York Times or one of those, it doesn't matter. And he was talking about how President Donald Trump is already poised and ready with his advisors, with all of the people that he's putting in place, with his team. He's rip-roaring ready to go. And on day one, he is going to hit the ground running like you've never seen anyone hit the ground running before.
When you look at where he is now in 2024 versus 2016, this is an entire different level of organization and preparedness for a new administration. I would make the case that we've never seen an administration ever come into day one ready to go like President Trump is. Quite frankly, because he's done it before. So when you talk about the personnel, having named people for each cabinet spot by Thanksgiving, that's way ahead of the pace from where it was in 2016. He has a chief of staff that's in place. They have executive orders. They're ready to go on day one. President Trump is ready to hit the ground running.
And that's very interesting because President Trump is in a position that not a lot of presidents find themselves in, having had the 4-year gap in between his administrations. Not since Grover Cleveland has that ever happened, and that's the only time it happened. So President Trump understands the first time a president goes to Washington, whether it's President Trump or President Clinton or President Bush, whoever it is, the first time you enter the White House, you don't have any experience at being president. Sure, you may have been vice president or some other high-ranking position in the government, but you have never been president, and there's a learning curve. Donald Trump had 4 years to learn. He had 4 years to figure out that you can't trust anybody in Washington, D.C. There will be leaks from your White House. People that you think are trusted advisors aren't necessarily that at all. And you've got to figure out how to manage the chaos and make sure that you've got a team in place that is loyal to you. Over the last 4 years, that's exactly what Donald Trump has been doing. He's not only been figuring out the agenda that's going to be a winning agenda for the campaign, but he's figured out how to hit the ground running on day one and be a president for all people, and also put in positions of power people who are loyal to him and will execute his plan with the passion and the vigor and the zeal that he himself will execute the plan. He's looking for people that are MAGA conservatives, America first, Washington outsiders who want to obliterate the deep state and the bureaucracy and get rid of all that stuff. That's why he's wrapped himself with folks like Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy and Caroline Leavitt, and that's why he's tapped Pete Hegseth to be Secretary of Defense, who it looks like is going to be nominated and confirmed with absolutely no issues. He may even get some Democrat votes, most notably John Fetterman, who met with Pete Hegseth yesterday and said, I'm not against Pete Hegseth for Secretary of Defense. I see no reason at this point to vote no. I'll tell you, John Fetterman is slowly becoming my favorite Democrat, and I don't really like Democrats at all. But he's making a case for why we should. Stephen Miller also said something else which kind of roiled the feathers of the other members of the cabinet, or I'm sorry, of the round table discussion he was at. And basically he said, you know what, in all intents and purposes, Donald Trump, he's already president.
He's already the president, effectively. You have foreign leaders coming to visit him. He's issuing threats to terrorists.
Don't we still have one president at one time? Or is
Yes,
this...
we do.
No, I'm saying in the eyes of world leaders. They're already looking past Joe Biden because, well, the Democrats have put him out to pasture.
And the Democrats, by their own doing, have put Joe Biden out to pasture, and now they're complaining that Donald Trump is acting like the president. But he's absolutely right. He is meeting with world leaders. He had Justin Trudeau fly down to Mar-a-Lago at the threat of 25% tariffs. He had the president of Turkey at Mar-a-Lago last week to talk about how great the country's going to be. He went to Notre Dame by the invitation of the French president, Emmanuel Macron, and he met with Prince William, and he met with the president of Italy. All kinds of world leaders are lining up to meet with President Donald Trump because, as Jason Miller so eloquently put it, the Democrats, they've already put Joe Biden out to pasture. Donald Trump has filled the vacuum of the presidency that was left behind by Joe Biden and the Democrats. Because by forcing Joe Biden out of the race, by putting Kamala Harris up there, one of the worst decisions the Democrats ever made, one of the best decisions that ever happened that helped the Republican Party, by doing that, they've basically, really castrated Joe Biden and removed all of his power. He is just grazing around like an old billy goat or an old sow, just, ready to lay down and meet his maker. And the Democrats have no plan for the future. So Donald Trump has filled the vacuum and he is reaching out to world leaders. One of those world leaders is Xi Jinping. And President Donald Trump, it's been confirmed, he reached out with an invitation to President Xi Jinping from China to come to his inauguration on January 20th. And reports are that China's Xi Jinping is likely to decline Trump's inauguration invitation, seeing it as too risky to attend. Risky from a security standpoint and also from how it would, from a public relations standpoint as well. This is from the AP. Chinese leader Xi Jinping would likely see President-elect Donald Trump's invitation to attend his inauguration as too risky to accept. And the gesture from Trump may have little bearing on the increasingly competitive ties between the two nations as the White House changes hands. Trump's incoming press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, confirmed on Thursday that Trump extended an invitation to the January 20th ceremony. The Chinese embassy in Washington said it had no information to provide, but experts don't see Xi coming to Washington next month. Could you imagine Xi Jinping sitting outdoors in Washington, D.C. in January at the feet of the podium, surrounded by hawkish members of Congress, gazing up at Donald Trump as he delivers his inaugural address? Said Danny Russell, who previously served as Assistant Secretary for State for East Asia and Pacific Affairs. He's now Vice President for the International Security and Diplomacy Society. And he said, I don't think the Chinese will take the risk. The risks could be, for example, that there might be someone from Taiwan on the guest list, which there probably would be, and they don't want any kind of ceremonial or diplomatic problems to arise at President Trump's inauguration. But President Donald Trump reaching out to Xi Jinping for the invitation is significant. You may remember that Xi Jinping accepted an invitation to come to California and visit with Gavin Newsom in San Francisco, which was incidentally the only time that Gavin Newsom decided to clean up all of the homeless people and the drug addicts off the streets of San Francisco. So I don't know, maybe it would do great for Washington, D.C. Maybe they'd be able to clean up the streets if Xi Jinping came for a visit too. Although I think Donald Trump's plan is to clean up Washington, D.C. for good, not just for visiting dignitaries. Speaking of Pete Hegseth, there were a couple of other things that I wanted to mention about President Trump, his administration incoming, and also his agenda. And one of them is Pete Hegseth, who has continued to be targeted by various different news agencies as he continues to go through the process of getting confirmation. And CNN had a story about him and comments he's allegedly made back when he was enlisted. Pete Hegseth was in the halls of Congress, and a reporter asked him about it, and he had, I think, one of the best responses.
Do you believe that gay people should be allowed to serve in the military?
Yes.
You said, can you just respond to the CNN report this morning? It was highlighting some of your previous comments. Saying
I don't feel the need to respond to CNN.
I don't feel the need to respond to CNN, said Pete Hegseth, President Trump's choice for Secretary of Defense. I don't feel the need to respond to CNN. That is something that we don't hear a lot out of the government. That's not something we hear a lot out of our elected officials. But this is, of course, a brand new government. This is a brand new administration. This is Trump 2.0. And CNN can say whatever they want. MSNBC can say whatever they want. But the elected officials no longer acknowledge or respect or believe the reporting coming out of these news agencies. And therefore, they don't feel the need to respond. You're also starting to see a shift in some of the Democrat realization that immigration is a serious problem, and that President Donald Trump's plan for immigration is not only effective, but necessary to the security, the sanctity, the safety, and the future of some of our great American cities. And one of them is New York City, with Mayor Eric Adams, who met with Tom Homan, the incoming border czar, amid outrage from his citizens. Can you imagine? You live in New York City, you're inundated with illegal immigrants. They're taking over your hotels. They're taking over your streets. They're sleeping out there in the open. There's crime on the rise. And all of your tax dollars, $5 billion just last year alone, went to house and to feed and to provide sanctuary to all of these illegal immigrants that Joe Biden has just been dumping on your city streets. I'd be furious. Kids that were going to school in New York couldn't use their own gymnasiums because they were being used to house illegal immigrants. Well, Eric Adams has had enough, and he met with Tom Homan, the incoming border czar, and people in New York City were furious. But Eric Adams doesn't care because he says, look, we've got serious problems here.
We have 500,000 children who had sponsors in this country that we can't find. We can't find them. We don't know if they're doing child labor. We don't know if they're doing sex crimes. We don't know if they're being exploited. 500,000 children. There's a level of hypocrisy that everyone that states they want to protect everyone but innocent individuals who are victims of crimes and children. I want to support and protect children and innocent people that are victims of crime. And those who don't understand that, it's not up to me to try to convince them. I know what my job is, my goal is, and I was clear of that while running and when I became mayor. Safety means everything to me. 500,000 children, we don't know where they are right now in this country.
Eric Adams, again, siding with the President Trump border plan and the border policy, and Tom Homan, and saying, look, this is ridiculous. This has gone on too long. The policies of Joe Biden and the Democrat Party have been horrible. And that is why President Trump received the mandate from the American people to come clean it up. And Eric Adams isn't going to stand in the way There are other mayors in other cities that Tom Homan has already said, we will throw you in jail if you get in the way of the federal government enforcing this immigration policy. We will throw. Do you remember the mayor of out in Denver, Colorado, said, I'm ready and willing to go to jail. And Tom Homan said, well, we agree on that. If you're ready and willing to go to jail, I'm ready and willing to arrest you. You will not get in the way of the American mandated immigration policy that Donald Trump is going to put in place on day one. You will not stand in the way of Donald Trump and his administration executing the plan, upholding the law, removing illegal criminals from this country, and putting them back from whence they came, while at the same time securing our border and our city streets, not just for us, but for our posterity and for all time. That's what Donald Trump was hired to do. That's what he's going to do. That's why he's Time Magazine's Person of the Year. And more Democrats are coming on board to help him do just that. We've got so much more to cover. We've got so much more great news and commentary. And we do all of that later today at noon in our Mark Kaye Saves the Republic podcast. At noon Eastern, 11 Central, we go live on all these fantastic outlets like YouTube and Rumble and X. And then, of course, we have a downloadable podcast that you can hear anytime you want. Go to Mark Kaye Saves the Republic on iTunes or Spotify or just darn near anywhere you get your podcasts. Download, listen, and enjoy.